Welcome, everybody, to the Ambition Project Show. I'm your host, Deirdre Sanborn. On this show, I interview ambitious leaders who share their stories about what's worked for them so that you, the listener, can achieve greater levels of success at work, with your teams, in your communities, and in your life. My guest today is Kate Delaney, an Emmy Award winner and nationally syndicated sports radio talk show host for NBC. Kate is not just the voice on the radio covering huge sporting events like the Broncos win at the Super Bowl 50 this weekend. She's interviewed 12,000 people, that's 12,000 people in her 20 years in radio and talk show, and has picked up some incredible insights along the way. So Kate, I've given our listeners a quick overview about you, but maybe you could tell me a little bit more about yourself.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the sports radio, and I'll tell you what, it wasn't easy to get into sports radio because the first couple of times where I knocked on the door, I was rejected. I had one man say, "Ooh, nobody likes a woman doing sports, and nobody even likes a woman on the radio." So I thought, wow. And I was doing television news at the same time, but all the men around me were so encouraging, and they said, no, you are good at this. Don't listen to somebody who tells you can't do it. And of course, I wasn't listening. I was just following my path and pushing that aside. So it took me probably an extra 2 years to get into sports radio, and I stayed as a news television anchorwoman in California because it was tough to crack that door open, and finally it did, and it was like, woo, I've arrived. This is where I belong, and I never looked back since then. So I think there's detractors to females actually doing sports on the radio still, and I think there's a lot of positivity, and there's a lot of men who work in the industry that really don't see it that way.
So it's like you cracked the code a little bit, but for a while there, you were an anchor woman in California. So you're more accepted in one niche, if you will, but sports talk radio is a little bit harder, a lot of bit harder.
Absolutely. I was completely accepted in television news. I had skins on the wall. I knew how to cover stories. I was the lead anchor. I had no problems there. But when it came to making the transition into sports, there was definitely some pushback to that. But I found, like I mentioned, that there were enough people around me that were supportive, men and women, but certainly lots of men. It was just the gatekeepers, the people that would hire you, that weren't as interested. And finally, I found some terrific people that were. And the funny thing was, Deirdre, a lot of them were in very big places. So New York City, Mark Chernoff, who was program director for WFAN, and he was, in fact, the guy who put Howard Stern on the map. He was Howard Stern's PD. And then currently now, for example, I work with Jack Silver, who's the PD of the NBC Sports Radio Network, and he couldn't be more encouraging.
Wow. So I hear for 2 years you kind of throttled yourself back, but you did have supporters around you. Tell me a little bit about what shifted for you during that 2-year period, because you did have people around you who were supporting you. And then what was that breakthrough event where you met the man in New York who brought you into huge markets?
Well, I think what really happened was I worked with two guys in television news who did sports. They were the sports anchors. Mm-hmm. And they decided, listen, when we both are gone, we are going to we're going to force them to put you on the set and do sports. And I mean, how great is that? Amazing. So sure enough, that's what happens. They're both going to go away. And the one anchor tells the program director, listen, she's good, put her on. And if she completely bombed, which I know she won't, it's not a worry. She'll go back to, TV news and nobody will care. So it worked out great because I went on the set. I did sports. I did it well. I was a little nervous, but I did the highlights. I was excited. I knew my stuff. And then I started to find that, okay, now I have a little more credibility because I've got these great clips. And every time they went away, I would be allowed to fill in, and I would take that. And that transitioned into me doing radio sports in the morning on the side And then I was able to send a pretty good tape to the guy in New York, and he auditioned me and picked me over all the other candidates.
Wow. So it sounds like it was a combination of patience, great connections, skill, a little luck, and good timing. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think I don't know how much luck played a part of it, because I believe more in opportunity. It's when the opportunity's right, you know you're there and you're prepared. So I was definitely prepared. I was ready to do it. I felt confident, and that opportunity met at the right time. And of course, 1,000 men auditioned. I was the only woman.
That's amazing.
But Mark Chernoff liked my stuff, and he brought me in for an audition, and I warmed up all the people around me, because now this is just an audition, and told them all I'd take them out for dinner afterwards. And the crew, who didn't know me, did a really good job of propping me up and making sure I was good, I was fine when I was taking calls and doing what I had to do. And I think that helped. So I think whenever you're in one of those positions, you want to win the people over around you.
So that's the power of networking. Not only were you very well prepared and clearly you have a love of sports, but also you took care of the people around you who are supporting you in the journey to trying to take that next step.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were the ones that, whether it was the anchors in California, or whether it was the crew when I went to audition, and all the people in between that were encouraging me, I think that ultimately, gave me extra confidence, gave me that boost I needed that really helped.
That's great. And would you say you have the gift of networking, or do you have something that's special that other people can't really achieve, or is this something that others can do as well? In other words, do you have any tips or strategies for people to help networking work best for them?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm very good at networking. I wouldn't have said that if you had interviewed me 20 years ago. I would have said, oh, no. But I am good at networking. And I think the reason I'm good at networking, and the tip that I would give everybody, is I was just myself. I was just authentic. So in other words, I didn't go to a party, I didn't go to a meeting, I didn't go to a place where somebody specifically said to me, listen, hand out every card you can, schmooze every person in the room you can, just work around that room like a Tasmanian devil and something will happen. I just was myself, and I tried to have conversations that were meaningful, not, hey, dude, can you help me? Here's my card. Because I don't think that works. Even if people encourage you to do that, I don't think that works. I think you have to develop relationships.
Well, it feels like a one-way conversation when you're trying to get someone to do something for you, right? So the powerful networking opportunity is how you can work in concert with someone to achieve an end that's a win-win situation. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think the one-way street is very difficult. But listen, I bet for everybody listening, all of us have been there, because somebody tells you that's what you need to do, or you think, geez, it's my fault. I read a book. I'm supposed to run out and I'm supposed to just talk to everyone. But that's not really how it works, because it's uncomfortable when you kind of barge yourself into the middle of a conversation or into a circumstance where it doesn't really fit. There's a way to massage that. And I think that's the key. It's learning how to just be yourself and how to massage those moments and let it go if it doesn't work out, and then circle back around.
So it's being comfortable in your own skin, trusting that who you are is exactly who you need to be, perhaps. Yep. And then would you say there's something about depth of relationship versus breadth of relationship, trying to touch as many people as possible versus like getting to know people better?
I think it's a combination. That's a great question, because if somebody tells me I need to meet somebody and they tell me, well, they're going to be here, so make sure you meet them, there is still that aspect of it. And of course, they're not going to know me that well in the beginning. So initially, you have to take that leap and you have to make the connection. So initially it is kind of like just a first blush, and you wait and you see and you try to develop something there. And I think the more you develop it, the deeper it gets, the more connected you become, the more clear everything becomes around you, I guess, to what you're trying to achieve. And can this person that you're connected to help you, and vice versa? What can you do for them?
Right,
I think the key thing is also, what can you do for them?
Yeah. Yeah. So you've interviewed some pretty incredible people during your career. 4 presidents, LeBron James, I think most recently Peyton Manning after Super Bowl 50. Tell us a little bit about how you've generated those contacts, those connections, and what's it meant for you. Tell us more about like how those experiences were for you.
Well, those experiences were great. I mean, I've interviewed some really incredible people, not all of them giant names, but so many that you mentioned obviously are household names, iconic, etc. And Peyton Manning, I've known him his entire really football career, from the time when he was in college, the first time that I interviewed him when he was at Tennessee, and then moving forward throughout his career. And he was always just a very gracious, a terrific interview, had great insight into the game of football. He has a really dry sense of humor, so he was funny. I wasn't surprised when the commercial success happened in the spots that he did with his brother, or commercial spots that he did by himself. So what happened was, along the way, I wasn't afraid to reach out to get guests that were big guests, whether I wanted to reach out to somebody because they had something of interest, I thought, to the listeners, or they just had this huge name and I knew immediately people would recognize them and be excited about it. I mean, it's human nature. You can't help it. When you say, hey, tonight we have LeBron James on and he's going to teach Kate how to play basketball, people are going to pay attention to that. So I wasn't afraid to, in the sense of getting guests, I wasn't afraid to reach out to anybody. And if I was rejected, I was rejected. And then I would just move on to whoever the next person was on a list. I made a giant wish list. Who are the people I really want to interview? And I would start to chip away at the list. And I had 150 names on it. And I've interviewed every one of the people on the list.
Wow. So it sounds like people are pretty generous with their time. And you just go for it. You ask people if they'd interview with you. And generally they say yes.
Yes, generally. I mean, there were people that would say no, or you'd have a scheduling conflict. It would depend. But generally, I have had, and still do, have pretty good luck with that. And maybe part of that is my approach. And also now my reputation may help a little bit. It doesn't hurt where I am in this space now to have NBC, which is a giant network behind me, and to be on 400 affiliates and have 3 million listeners. So now my career has turned itself around where I'm not trying to get to that point. I'm at that point, and I think that helps a little bit.
That's amazing. There's something that you do really well, and you actually have labeled it. It's called influential listening. How does that help you in your career, and more specifically, as an interviewer myself, how does it help you in framing your questions and your conversations with people?
Yeah, that's another good question. To me, what happens in conversations, whether it's an interview or if it's a work-related relationship or anything in your life, what happens is, we've got one mouth and 2 ears. And scientifically, it's proven that we really only use the capacity of hearing 25%,
wow,
which is amazing. That would be like a lousy baseball player. You would need to get up to the majors for a cup of coffee. You'd be in the minors for the rest of your life.
Yes.
So that's all of us. I mean, we're talking brilliant people, all kinds of people. So already you have to work at it. And by being able to listen, where you can clarify, where you clearly are connecting, I think it leads to great profits in not just the monetary sense, if that's what you're seeking, but in the relationships that you develop with the people that you interview or the people that are in your life, because you're paying attention. We live in what I call the 140 character world, which is Twitter. So people have such short attention spans. 8 seconds is the average attention span. That means you got to hook somebody right away. So on the other end, if they're hooking you, you want to give them full on attention, and you've got to really focus. And if not, especially if it's something important, I think you should reschedule it. If you can't take a breath and you can't clear what's on your mind, then, and that's another thing, here's a great statistic for you, not to bore everyone to death with statistics, but in your brain at every minute, this is also a scientific fact, you are going through 40 to 70 thoughts a minute. 40, 70 thoughts. I thought that was ridiculous until I contacted somebody from Princeton and somebody from MIT, and I verified that fact. That's staggering. But they're there in your brain, and easy for that to distract you from the conversation at hand.
Do you have any tips or strategies? Those are amazing statistics, only using 25% of your listening capacity, having so many ideas going through your brain at once. Like, how do you focus and tone down the internal clutter and really become present with somebody, especially with you? I mean, that's your career, so you're a superstar at it. Do you have anything you could share with the listeners that can provide them with guidance on how to do it as well as you do it?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is you got to realize when you're talking to someone, there could be traffic around you. You could be sitting in a cafe. So you're not always in a quiet little office that you can just close the door. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're in that situation, any of those situations that I just mentioned with external distractions around you, before you go into the conversation, if it's important and you have the minute to do that, just take a breath. We don't breathe enough. And take that deep breath and try to clear your mind. Mm-hmm. The other thing I would say, maybe even a step before you do that, is let's say you've got 50 ideas rolling through your brain, and some of them are fantastic because you're going to do this today, you've got to pick up your kids, you've got to go here, you're connecting the dots. Just write a list out. And on an iPhone or an Android, there's a notepad, because I know it's not like we're walking around like Lois Lane with our reporter notebooks and our pens, but if you can write it down that way, or write it down on the iPhone. So just push it aside. You've got it out there. You're not going to lose that thought for your next great novel, or to pick up your son from school, or to do whatever it is you have to do. And now just push it aside and leave it over in a different spot. And you'll find that it'll be easier to focus on what's happening, I think, in that conversation. I think that, to me, that is the number one tip to trying to focus on what's happening between the two people.
That's a really great tip, Kate. And does your influential listening come into play when, so let me back up one step and give the listeners some background. You've been the chief operating officer of the Golden Broadcasters radio network and negotiated several $million contracts. Listening, I know, is a key component of negotiations. Tell me a little bit about how those two weave together, if they do.
They do weave together, because what happens in a negotiation, there's, besides also, by the way, what you're doing with your words, and so many people talk about this, it's body language. Mm-hmm. Though I don't always agree with body language. For example, I know all of you can see me. If you like this, and sometimes I do that, I'm resting my arms.
Now I'm like, all of a sudden, like, oh, what is my body saying?
Yeah, do not take offense. If you ever see me and I go like this, I'm probably just resting. It's just a comfortable spot.
Exactly.
So there's things you can take away from body language experts that don't always apply.
Right.
But certainly you can look for certain cues in the eyes and the way someone's reacting to what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And especially with the listening, because listen to what they're saying and don't let your mind, this is another mind trick, jump ahead. So you're trying to close a deal. You're trying to get somebody to buy something you're offering, and that's always the greatest example, but it could be in any kind of negotiation. You have to really listen to what they're saying. What is it they want? Don't think about your list of here's what I need them to do. So my mind is thinking he or she is going to finish what they're saying, and here's what I'm saying next. Because then I miss what they're telling me, where I might go off script and follow what they're saying because it doesn't follow the little outline that I put together.
Right.
Who cares? go away from the outline and focus on that conversation.
Go off script. Yep.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I did have some questions scripted for you, but we've had such a fabulous conversation so far that we've gone off script.
It works, see?
I'm a quick learner. So tell me a little bit about, you've had an amazing career, tremendous contacts, great opportunities, like being able to meet with some amazing athletes in the job that you do. And you speak to people about negotiating and influential listening based on your experience. You also talk about someone's wow factor. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit more about the wow, and how do you identify somebody's wow, and why is that important?
Well, the wow is important because think about this. How many times do you have the contacts that we were talking about before in your life where you meet somebody and who knows the kind of connected relationship you could have, whether you're maybe on an airplane, whether you're at a luncheon and you don't know the people at your table, perhaps it's someplace else where you're waiting in some line somewhere. Who knows? There's a million points of contact with human beings. And often the conversation will turn to, hey, who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? That kind of stuff. So can you clearly, going back to the 8 seconds, can you clearly, confidently define who you are and what you're about? And it doesn't have to be that, well, I have this label, I'm an attorney, mm-hmm. I'm a Supreme Court justice. Mm-hmm. Notice how I go for the high. I'm a member of Congress, I'm a teacher, I'm an athlete. It doesn't have to be that. It could be anything else. It's what you think really defines you. I'll give you a quick example. I have a friend who's a florist, and he's in New York City, and of course there's a million flower shops, and his business wasn't down in the dumps, but it wasn't doing as well as he had hoped it would be. So I told him, what do you tell people you do? Well, I'm the flower guy, yada yada, and I hand out my cards, and it has the flower address. I said, why don't you tell people, how many flowers do you think you've sent to people or people have ordered? And he said, over 1 million. And I told him, tell people the next time, I'm the guy who puts the smile on 1 million plus people's faces in Manhattan. And then boom, somebody stops and they say, what do you mean you put smiles on people's faces? Oh, because I know how to arrange flowers in incredible ways that are mind-blowing, whether it's a sad situation, a happy situation, whatever it might be. And see the difference between I'm a florist or I put 1 million smiles plus on Manhattan. Can you imagine? And that's less than 8 seconds. And it really kind of kicked open the door to other conversations with people. And he swears that it led to probably 30% or more bump in his business.
Wow, that's amazing, because I think most people would be like, wait, how do you do that? And so it comes back to the experience, for the direct experience, or even appeals to people's emotions as opposed to you labeling yourself as a product or service.
Well, you said it. How do you do that? So that means you're going to have a longer conversation with my friend, because he didn't just say, as we were handing cards around at the Chamber of Commerce in downtown Manhattan, oh, I have a flower shop. There's just a difference in his passion and his tone and the excitement over what he does and what he's passionate about.
And then it makes, if I had met that guy, I'd be like, I want to be one of those people. You put a smile on my face too.
Exactly.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, it intrigues you.
Yes, it does. It does. Well, is there anything else about you? What is your wow? And is there anything else you want to share with the listeners about Kate Delaney?
My wow is the wow that you said really at the top of this interview. That I've interviewed. I've had the privilege of interviewing over 12,000 people in my career and counting. And I like connectedness and I like people. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's been a pretty amazing ride, and I think I am absolutely in the right space. There's no question about that. And that has to do with the wow, meeting influential listening, meeting all those right moments in my life where I was ready for the opportunity. And I would tell anyone listening, whether you're frustrated or whether you're where you are and you think, ooh, what's next? You keep digging, you keep doing what you love to do, whatever it is. and eventually those roads will collide, because I am absolutely living proof of it. And there are thousands of people that could tell you that story.
Amazing. Well, you've already been a wealth of information. Are there any products or resources that you'd like to share with the listeners to help them achieve similar breakthroughs in their life as you have?
Sure. You can go to my website, katedelaney.speaks.com, and there's I've got a couple of different offerings. I speak to all kinds of groups because they ask me how to find their wow. They ask me, organizations have me come in, a lot of corporations, and I'll take 12 people at a time, usually, if it fits, if it's the right fit. And we go through that and go through projects they're working on so they can better achieve what their goal is ultimately at the end. And you'll see all of that there. And of course, I've got a couple of books, and that's also listed on the website. You can always go to invadethemancave.com.
Yeah, best name ever. Oh, wait, hold on one sec. I have to show the listeners. Check out this cover. It's awesome. I mean,
yes,
that's just wow right there. Wow.
That is a wow. And it doesn't matter who picks it up, whether it's a man or a woman, they always remark on it and say, either I wish I had those abs or I wish I knew him. So it is pretty funny. Absolutely.
Do you, besides the books that you've written, do you have any books that you would recommend to the listeners that you've read? That's
a good question. It depends on what the listener, for anybody out there that's listening, depends on what you're into. I can tell you one book that I would recommend, and excuse the title, but it's called You're a Badass.
Ooh, please.
It's by Jen Sincero, and she pretty much peels back the layers of, okay, so what do you need to do to get where you're going? And it's an easy read. It's fun. And I think it's just a brilliant book. I mean, there's old standbys like Think and Grow Rich,
right?
Because some sage advice from so long ago.
Right.
It's just rewritten, really applies. I think there are some terrific new business books that are coming out that I can't wait to crack open myself. But there's a wealth of information out there, and it depends on how you like that information. And I think a smart thing to do is, we still have libraries. Either go to the library, or you can do it electronically and dig through the business section and look specifically at the titles and what the subtitles are to see where that may apply to you. You can never, ever read enough. Every day I read at least a half an hour, even if I'm swamped. And there's days when I don't know how I do it, Deirdre, but I do it. And I read.
It's because you're a badass.
That's right. I'm a badass. I read things across the board, from whether it's a biography, whether it's financial, whatever it might be. And of course, a lot of that also has to do with periodicals. I would say, here's a great tip for all of you out there. And it seems so simple, but people don't do it. Pick up a Wall Street Journal. Pick up, the Washington Times. Pick up the New York Times. Pick up the LA Times. Get a different flavor for what other people are talking about around the country. And you don't have to actually physically pick up the paper. You can go, obviously, online and do that. Read a couple of articles. Get a sense of what people are doing around the country, and educate yourself. And that current event knowledge is powerful.
So what I hear you saying is being informed is crucial to your wow, to being able to engage with people, and information is power.
Absolutely. And because, again, that's something else in your arsenal. When you're well informed, the depth of your conversation can only be better. I mean, if you only do one thing, for example, like I'm new into running. I used to run, and I like to run, and I think you like to run.
I love
and there's
to run.
really, there's Runner's World, there's a million magazines. But imagine if all I did was read Runner's World and I didn't do anything else. Well, I could tell you everything about the latest wear and what you should get for your feet and all that, but I wouldn't be able to tell you what else is happening in the world. I think this is what I would really attribute also to part of the success I've had. I'd have to give credit to my mother, because we grew up, my brother Patrick and I, in a really well-rounded household. It was important for her to not only take us to the ballet, even if he went kicking and screaming, but to take us to baseball games, to take us to museums, to take us to see other cultures. We flew to Venezuela and you don't have to be rich to do this, and we certainly weren't, when we were, 8 years old, because she wanted us to see how other people lived. And I think the more open-minded you can be, the more you absorb that information, it's that much more powerful as when you go out into the world, what you're putting out into the world and what comes back to you.
Right. And so, wow, thanks, Mom, for being so an influential mentor to Kate. And I think for all parents need to take that in consideration, is how they're expanding the lives and the minds of their kids.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to have tunnel vision because you know what you like, and a lot of it is probably fabulous, but it's good to see what else is out there. And I think to introduce that, and at a young time in your life where you're wide-eyed and ready to absorb perhaps a little bit more, some of those opinions aren't completely formed, you're not a brick wall yet. It's I think it's really changed my life, and my brother too as well.
Amazing. Well, one last thing. I like to close out my shows by asking my guests if they have a favorite ambition quote, or to share with the audience, what does ambition mean to you? Do you have something you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, my favorite quote, it's one that I really live by. I used to, and I still do. I have it in my office, and it's just so ingrained in my brain. Leap and the net will find you. Ooh. I know there's probably different versions of it. I'm sure there is. But to me, that meant, you know what? There's no harm, no foul. If I don't take a chance where I'm going to be in the same place today that I was yesterday, that I was last year, I don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to take the chance, because the net will find you. And I really believe that. And because of that, I'm not afraid to strike out and try lots of different things, whether they fail the first time, the second time, the third time, or maybe I find it's not right and there's a better avenue to get where I'm going. Just don't let life beat you down, or other people. I would say the leap in the net will find you. You want to surround yourself with people who feel a similar way.
Right, that's important.
Versus the energy suckers, because what happens, I think, often, Deirdre, is that people who feel like they can't achieve it, or they're afraid. Fear is very powerful. Inertia is a powerful thing. And the people around you, if they're living in that bubble, they're going to encourage you to do the same thing, because they don't necessarily want you to leave the nest of negativity, I'll call it. So just remember that. To me, that's what ambition means, that you're not afraid to take a chance. You're not afraid every day to wake up and say, wow, I'm alive. What's new? What can I do next? Where am I going? This is fun. This is great. And make it fun. I think too often...
Fun is so important.
Yeah, I think too often... I mean, I love business. I love sports. I love running, I mentioned. I love all kinds of things I'm into. And I don't want to do it if it's not fun, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's because that's how I've lived my life, with that leap in the net will find you theory. And I think that has to do with fun. Don't be afraid to strike out.
Well, you've definitely modeled leap in the net will find you in your life. And you've done an amazing job of surrounding yourself with people who've supported you and overcoming the naysayers to really go for what you were passionate about and ambitious about. So thanks for joining us on the show, is modeling what ambition means, and for sharing that quote. I just want to close out by saying, if you have anything else to share, I know you had mentioned you had an influential listening tip sheet. Is that something that you can share with the listeners as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, go to Kate Delaney Speaks and download it, and all the tips are there, and they're in depth. So it tells you what to do, not just here's a tip, like make sure you forget the distractions around you and figure out a way to do that and clear your mind. It goes a little bit deeper than that. So if you go there, you'll see those tips.
Well, I'll include that on the link to this podcast as well. So you can find these links to the resources and everything else we've been chatting about in today's episode by going to theambitionprojectshow.com. And to learn more about Kate, I'll repeat, go to katedelaney.speaker.com, or you can find her on Twitter at Real Radio Talk. So if you've loved this show, you'll definitely want to join our Facebook community, and I look forward to connecting with you there. So just to wrap up, my mission is to spread big ideas from ambitious leaders like you, so that more and more people can learn from it. Is there anything I can do to make this interview a win for you?
I think you've already done it. You've mentioned the links, and if people go to those spots, they can find me. And it's always great to be exposed to new people and exposure for the Ambition Project. I think, where it is today, who knows even how much more it'll explode. It's already gotten people raising their eyebrows, which I think is terrific. So no, you've really done it for me.
Thanks, Kate. And to close out, who do you know and admire that I can invite to come on my show?
Ooh, that's such a good question. Who do I know and admire? Well, I'll tell you who I know and admire, and it's somebody who I believe you've met as well. And she's somebody kind of new in my life, but she's had a great impact in a short amount of time. Her name is Connie Podesta.
I love Connie. Yes.
And for most of the people listening, even if you're not a speaker, trust me, you probably know who she is. If you don't, if you look her up immediately, you'll see that she's had massive influence because she's spoken to people all over the place, all over the world, in different industries, and people remember her. She's not easy to forget, and she really embodies also the whole idea of fun, of spreading information in a palatable way. And she's terrific, and I think she'd be absolutely a brilliant person to have on the show.
Thanks. I'll definitely reach out to her, and she's such an incredible powerhouse. And if our guests want to listen or see her, she could be found at ConniePodesta.com. And I'll include that link in the AmbitionProjectShow.com website as well. So, Kate, the interview is officially over. What I love most about you is not only the depth of information that you shared with our guests, but also, show us like how amazing you are. You have such incredible wow.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's it's a building process, but it's worth it. If you just sit down, focus on what is it, come up with your wow, think of shortening what you're telling people when they say, "Who are you?" Don't go off on a long diatribe of what you've done and where you've been. Just focus on short little pieces.
Well, Kate, you can help me out with that after we're done with the show today. What do you say?
You're terrific, of course, anytime.
Okay. Well, Kate, thanks again. And one more time, KateDelaneySpeaks.com. Thanks again for joining us today. And Kate, thank you for your time.
Thank you. It was great.